Go ahead and call this Board of Water Resources briefing meeting to order. Thank you, Carmen, for helping us to start right on time. We'll begin our meeting as usual, our briefing meeting as usual, with introductions of the board and introductions of the staff. My name is Juliette Tennert. I represent Salt Lake and Tooele. Currently serving as chair. We will elect a new chair during our board meeting. I will note that board member Brian Steed is excused from this briefing meeting. We do expect him to be at the board meeting. Board member Blaine Ipson is excused from both the briefing meeting and the board meeting. However, if he finishes up with his appointment in time, he may join us online. We have a couple of new appointments to the board, and we'll let William Merkley introduce himself here in just 1 minute. Tim Hawks is also a new board member who was confirmed by the Senate last week. He is unable to join us today. And so with that, why don't we mix things up a little bit, and we'll go online to our board members first to introduce themselves. Then I'll have our vice chair and our new board member introduce themselves. So Spencer Jones.
Hi, I'm Spencer Jones, representing the Lower Colorado River Basin.
Thank you.
I'm Dana Van Horn, representing Carbon, Emery, Grand, and San Juan counties.
All right, thank you.
I'm Mike Davis. I'm the vice chair, and I represent the Provo River Drainage.
All right, and our newest board member.
Yes, thank you, Juliette. So I'm William Merkley. I represent the Green River District, counties of Duchesne, Uinta, and Daggett, replacing Randy Crozier, and just want to publicly acknowledge his service. And he's a good friend, and maybe we're still friends after this.
Well, we will miss him greatly, but we're so glad that you've carved out the time to participate. I wonder, board member Merkley, if you could just, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just for purposes of those who are zooming in or might be watching this at a later date, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I got good practice up at the Senate confirmation hearing. William Merkley, my wife is Stephanie. We have 5 children ranging from 16 to 5. So we are right in the thick of it. Four girls, 1 boy. So you can only imagine. I serve as the general manager of the Uinta Water Conservancy District. Our main responsibilities are 2 of the units of the Central Utah Project, the Jensen unit and the Vernal unit, or Staniker and Red Fleet reservoirs. And we have a pretty small group. There's only 7 full-time employees, but so it's more like a family than anything else. But it's been a pleasure. I've served there, in March it'll be 6 years. And many of you in the room and online know Gaywin Snow. Gaywin was the previous manager, and when he retired, I took his place.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Director Hassenjäger to introduce herself and her team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With us today, we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Todd Stoneley, Stephanie McGinnis, Marisa Egbert, Tom Cox, Ethan Stayner, Bradley Caldwell, Ani Baynard, Sarah Schechter, Edward Mueller, as well as Shannon Clow, who's taking minutes. Thank you, Shannon, and our awesome AV team, Paul Gedge and Carmen McDonald, that make this possible.
All right, thank you. I understand that we have a new staff member. Should we go ahead and get to know her?
Yes,
before
please.
We jump in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll have Stephanie McGinnis and Todd Stoneley come up. And Todd, would you introduce Stephanie for us?
Yeah, I'm super excited to introduce to you Stephanie McGinnis. She is our new State Water Plan Section Manager, and we're throwing her to the wolves, so to speak, but she's been with us before. She was a water conservation manager for a few months before she moved over to UDOT, but I'll let her introduce herself and give a little bit of her background.
Thank you, Todd. I'm really excited to be back with the division. As Todd mentioned, I was here just briefly with the water conservation section, and then UDOT stole me over. to them for a couple of years, but I really missed the division, and most importantly, I really missed the people that were here that I worked with. So when this position, when I saw it fly, I applied, and I'm really grateful that they welcomed me back. So I do come here with experience in water resource issues. I have 2 undergraduate degrees, one in biology, one in environmental studies, and I have a master's degree from Montana State University in biological sciences, but really my focus was on aquatic ecosystems. And I loved MSU, so I stayed on. I conducted research there for several years in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the streams and lakes. And then I also served as the assistant director of the Montana Water Center. There's some form of a water center in each state. That was a mandate from the Congress back in the 60s. And, you know, we worked really to try to solve water resource issues that were current and that we saw as future issues within the state of Montana by bringing folks together to collaborate. And one of the last projects that I worked on there was the first, I co-authored the first climate assessment for the state of Montana. So very excited to be here and bring sort of those water resource solving issues and collaboration skills to this project.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're thrilled to have you back. And, you know, I mean, transportation is incredibly important, but I feel like water is incredibly important. Just to have your brain here helping us is a big win for us. So thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? All right.
Thank you all.
you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Madam Chair, we do have one other new employee, Richard Salas. He's not available today, so we'll have him introduced at a future board member
Great.
or board meeting. Thank you.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you. All right. Let's go over the agenda. So we'll need to start with an oath of office for new board members. So Board Member Merkley will do the oath of office, and then I was just reappointed myself, which I'm very excited about. So I understand that I'll do the oath of office as well. And then I guess new board member Tim Hawks will do the oath of office likely the next meeting. Is that
Probably
correct?
in March,
Okay.
yes.
All right. That's great. And then we also will need to do the election of board officers for 2025. We were chatting. This date came up quickly.
You are smiling way too much.
I am.
out
I'm
there.
thinking. I mean, it is a lot because you think about. Well, here it's cake. It's no problem. It'd be great for you, and it will be nice to for me to maybe take a little bit of a break from talking. So it's just been a great honor to serve as chair for the past bit. The chair position, I think, a lot of it is somewhat administrative, just making sure that our meetings run smoothly. There's some policy things, but we're such a small board that the team at Water Resources really does a great job of just keeping the entire board engaged. I know that some boards, the chair is very engaged and knows what's going on, and there's a bit of maybe disconnect between information and such, but that I've found to not be the case at all with the Board of Water Resources. So thank you for everything you do. I would assume we would follow normal process, which has been we usually elect a chair and a vice chair. And usually the vice chair that's elected previously would be elected as the chair, and then we'd look to elect that new vice chair. And so I will just throw this out there, but of course it's up to the board with what we all want to do. Board member Mike Davis has been our vice chair, and so if we follow normal process, we would look to him to accept a nomination as chair, and then hopefully vote on that nomination in the affirmative. And then I would suggest that board member Dana Van Horn then would be kind of following the normal process of how we rotate through these positions. We would nominate and appoint as vice chair. Is there any discussion to this? I don't know. Board members Van Horn and Jones. I'm not sure if you can see Mike Davis just being quiet over here, but I think I believe that again you'd be great at running the meetings, and also from that kind of policy perspective, you have so much experience in this space. I think that would greatly benefit from you accepting that nomination into the leadership position of the board?
Madam Chair, I would accept that
All right.
nomination.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Board Member Merkley, would you be open to making those nominations
During the regular
during the
meeting,
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
be happy to.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right. I guess we can go ahead and move on then right into the agenda. Oh. Yeah, board members Van Horn and Jones, I'm sorry, the hybrid situation, I'm still catching up with it. So any questions, comments?
No,
I
I'm
like
good.
Board member Jones.
You're next, Spencer.
Yeah, I was yeah, you have kind of a nice smile on your face there, but that is, yeah, and I think that's again, like, our normal process would be we just, depending on, your appointment to the board, rotating through these positions. So, all right. Let's see. So next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. These minutes from our last meeting would have been, or have been, shared with us in the board materials. Hopefully we've all had a chance to review them. I think we're missing out on some of our previous board members who were really great at catching edits even. So we'll miss that expertise. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? Anything that we need to look to formally amend during the meeting?
I will take Charlie's place of
Okay.
being the proofreader.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm quite good at it, so I will happily do that, and
Okay.
I will make the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. All right. And then we will have our NRCS snow report from Jordan Clayton after we do our minutes. We'll hear that report when we hear that report, but Director Hassenjäger, is there anything we need to know, expect on that?
It's not great. Statewide, when I looked yesterday, I gave a presentation up at the Senate Natural Resource Ag and Environment Standing Committee. The statewide total was roughly 77% of normal, maybe 76, but Southern Utah is much lower. I think it was 26 or 27% of normal. So it's not great. The one maybe bright hope or two bright hopes that I'm sure Jordan will cover is our reservoirs are still in pretty good shape, mostly. And then we have a change in our pattern. Unfortunately, it'll be a little warm. My husband would not think that's unfortunate, but it will be a little warmer, but we should get some snow this weekend up in the mountains and hopefully help to build up some of the snowpack that we've lost.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that briefing, and yeah, we'll look forward to more information and maybe a change in trend. I don't know. All right. So next, we'll move into the committal of funds. We have a couple for Davis and Weber counties. Canal Company Ani's going to come up. I think is Tom also going to maybe give us a little bit of context on these as well. Thanks, Ani. Thanks, Tom.
Guess that's what happens when you get to be the old guy.
The context is incredibly important, so thank you for flagging that and sharing it with us.
So if you look on the agenda, you'll notice there are 3 different projects under Davis Weber Canal Company. One is a canal improvement project, one is a secondary irrigation project, and one is a secondary meter project, funding for those. So we thought it would just be good to kind of review Davis Weber's situation and why we have multiple projects and why the interest rates are all different and terms. So if you have any questions anytime through this process, feel free to ask and I'll try to explain them. So just a little background about Davis Weber Canal Company. They provide about 60,000 acre feet of water annually. They mainly do wholesale water for ag, and some of their major shareholders are Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, Roy Water Conservancy District, and some other cities in the area. So their ag M&I split is about 50-50, even though the M&I is slowly taking over. So it is changing. At some point, the state auditor, I don't know if it was suggested or instructed or commanded that they split their wholesale water part from their M&I water part. So they are basically operating as two separate companies within a company. So all the expenses and the assessments are all separate. So the secondary irrigation assessments go to the secondary system part, and the canal shares, those assessments go to the operating and maintaining the canal. So that's why there are the three different, because one's the canal project, one's an M&I project, the secondary irrigation system, and one's the water meter one, which Davis Weaver has been pretty good even before it was the law was passed to require secondary meters. They started putting in secondary meters in their system. So a lot of that came through a federal grant, the Water Smart grant. They would get some Water Smart grant, put in some meters, and then the state got on board and required that. So that's the ARPA grant funds we've been using the last couple of years. So as far as the interest rate on the secondary one, we'll start that because that'll be the first one on the agenda. The board has a water affordability guideline of 1.4% of the median adjusted gross income of the area. So that's kind of the target water expense that we shoot for when we come up with repayments. In that particular area, they have a high median adjusted gross income, and so their target cost of water is higher. So we look at the cost of culinary water, the cost of irrigation water, and any water-related property tax that the residents pay. We take that into consideration when we look at the loan terms for M&I projects. So because their median adjusted gross income is so high, they are not up to that target amount that we think that we should be paying. And so the interest rate on that one is based on the full M&I interest rate that the board uses. And that's determined by tracking a bond index. We use 75% of it. I can't remember which exact index it is. So the interest rate is just over 3% now. So that kind of explains why the M&I project has the interest rate it does, and probably the shortest number of years. Is it 15 years?
It's 15 years, yes.
And the 15 years is the kind of in the guidelines it's been decided that that's the minimum number of years that a project has to be paid off. So they have the minimum number of years and the maximum interest rate because they don't meet the board's water affordability guideline. Any questions about that part? Then we'll jump over to the canal one. Back in 1999, the Davis-Weber Canal failed, and the company was required by the Division of Water Rights, before they put water back into the canal, to come up with a canal improvement plan. And so they did, and they came to the Board of Water Resources for funding to make improvements in the Davis-Weber Canal. And basically since the year 2000, we've been funding improvements to that canal. On the ag side, usually we try to have the repayment terms based on project benefits. So you pipe a ditch, you save water, you put that water on the ground, you get increased crop yields, and that's a benefit. So we try to use that benefit to determine the repayment terms. In Davis-Weaver Canal case, they don't really get any crop improvements. They don't get any more water because they're just making improvements to the canal. So back 20 years ago, however many years, it was, I think it was the section manager of the funding section that kind of set the precedent of saying, okay, we'll give them a good interest rate and we'll give them 30 years to pay the loan off because they really do not get any monetary benefit from making these improvements. So that's been followed through these years. And so what we've been doing recently, since their ag M&I water use split is about 50-50, we've come up with a weighted average of the interest rate, the 3%, whatever interest rate of M&I, and the 1% interest rate for the ag part. So putting those together, we come up with an interest rate that's in the canal project that you'll be hearing today. I think it's almost 2%. So any questions about that part? Okay, if not, then I think, and the water meter one is just determined that the interest rate would be 1% and the repayment term would be 5 years less than the meter warranty, and it turns out that most of the meters have a 20-year warranty, so it's the 1% interest repayment over 15 years. So that explains the repayment terms on that one. So.
Great, I'm looking online to my left. Looks like you've just provided so much information that we fully understand and don't have questions. But thank you for providing that context, because it you know, it's nice when you anticipate the questions that we're going to have, which would have been, well, why are those different? Thanks, Tom. All right, so Ani's going to take us through. Go ahead. Yeah.
What are you gonna have?
Yeah, that's what I was. So before we jump into these, we don't, and technically we haven't even taken the oath of office for the representative from Davis and Weber counties, which will be Tim Hawks. And so we need to have a board member jump in and cover the motions for these Davis and Weber counties projects.
I can do it.
Can you? Well, I think you'll be chairing.
Oh, then I can't do it. Does that happen at the start of the meeting?
Yeah.
You could do it, Julia.
I can take them. Sure. I'd be happy. Well, actually, why don't we maybe let's break it up. Is that okay? If we're okay with it. Assuming that we actually, we've authorized these projects already, but.
Yeah, I don't mind doing it either.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Why don't we have, actually, maybe it is just easier. Board member Van Horn, do you just want to take them? That's probably
that's
just
fine.
easier.
I don't care.
Okay. That's great.
I don't have any of my own.
Okay, that's great. Okay, excellent. All right, so we'll start then with RE 482. So this is the M&I project. Looks like we authorized this one in October. So Ani's going to brief us on it. Thank you. So yeah, right off the bat, the board authorized this project. Oh, it is green. That's something.
So the board authorized this project in October of 2024. It's located in Clinton City, Davis County. And it's basically, they have to relocate their secondary water line, which is being impacted by UDOT's road project on 1800 North in Clinton City. And the project has been put out to bid by UDOT, and they anticipate giving the notice to proceed by March, and the contractors will begin construction in the spring. And I can go into more detail at the board meeting if you want me to do the project summary at the board meeting.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments? I mean, nothing is, from what I see, there's nothing different than what we authorized, right? Yeah. All right. Good. Okay.
Staff, I can read the recommendation.
Yeah. Why don't just for the.
Staff recommends the board commit 85% of the project cost up to $2,825,000, and the project be purchased at 3.17% interest over 15 years, with annual payments of approximately $239,000 $1,600.
Okay.
And Rick will be here, even though he doesn't need.
Okay, but Rick will be here, okay. So we'll plan on Board Member Van Horn making the motion, and then because we are, and I should have mentioned this for the minutes, but because we are hybrid, it's my understanding that we do need to do a roll call vote, so Director Hassenjäger, will you help with that?
Yes, happy to help with that, Madam Chair.
Appreciate that. Okay, so then we'll go on, thanks Ani. If there's no more questions or comments, we'll go ahead and go on to RE 483. I think, is Ben going to brief us on this one? That one looks like we authorized it in our last June meeting. Looks like Marissa maybe is coming up to jump in for Ben.
Ben is not feeling well.
Okay.
I told him I would do this, and
Okay.
if he's online, I apologize, Ben.
Okay.
Doing that to you. This is also for the Davis-Weber County's Canal Company, and as Tom explained, the differences of this, and it is coming out of the Conservation Development Fund. So this, another situation with UDOT and also MIDA, and MIDA, M-I-D-A, is the, I'm going to look this up so I don't get it totally wrong, the Military Installation Development Authority. So it's involved with Hill Air Force Base. So it is a situation, again, where they're having to do some movement of their infrastructure to be able to accommodate this project that's going on. And this project was authorized in June of 2024 by the board, and none of the terms have changed. So the committal of funds is going to be as it was authorized. And staff is going to recommend the board commit 42.5% of the project cost, up to $3.2 million, and that the project be purchased at 1.95% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $141,900.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board on this one? Remind me, Marissa, is this the one where we had a relatively robust discussion about just making sure that, you know, that the cost sharing was appropriate with what UDOT was doing versus what MIDA was doing versus what we were doing? I'm trying to remember.
And that's a Tom.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Just trying to place it in my mind.
I'm gonna ask Tom to just stay here for that.
It's okay. I honestly don't have any specific questions. I was just trying to place it in my mind. And so hearing our vice chair confirm that discussion is.
Well, I don't particularly know more about this one. That I know more about the other one.
Yeah.
I know on the 1800 North one, the cost share you're seeing is only the part that UDOT is not paying for. UDOT is paying for part of the project. The improvements, I believe, on both of them are mainly the other improvements in addition to what UDOT is requiring. That's what the company is paying for.
Okay.
In the MIDA one, I'm not positive that's the case, but I'm pretty sure that they're moving the canal, and they've had extensive discussions with MIDA about who will pay for what, and what we're paying or what Water Resources is paying for is just what, what the agreement they came up with.
Okay. Thank you for.
Yeah, and there's a sentence there under project summary in the second paragraph that says the project will benefit the applicant by taking advantage of funding obtained through an MOU with UDOT and MIDA to enclose the canal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I remember this discussion now last time. They would have had to improve that section of canal anyway.
That's
just,
what I was, yeah.
Accelerated because of UDOT's thing, and they're actually having to move the canal because of UDOT's thing. So that's
right. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the board on this one? All right. And we'll assume that Board Member Van Horn will make the motion to approve. Right, next is one that is in my area, Draper Irrigation Company, RE491. You recall that we did authorize this project in December. I'll let Ethan brief us on this one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it's for Draper Irrigation Company. This one's coming from the revolving construction fund, and the cost estimate was $1,132,000. So, yeah, authorized at the last board meeting in December. The project includes the replacement of about, and yeah, it was authorized in December, and they have already met the requirements for committal, so they're on top of things, which is great. The project includes the replacement of about 2,600 feet of an existing 10-inch cast iron drinking water main line with 12-inch PVC pipe. The project will include replacement of 5 fire hydrants and 29 residential connections and a new PRV station. And then just a quick reminder how we came up with the terms. Looking at the median adjusted gross income, and with that guideline, we figure that they could afford to pay up to $81.67 monthly for water. Looking at their average water bill, their average secondary water bill, the property tax, and then this proposed loan puts them over $90. So they're almost $9 above the affordability guideline, and so that's why we recommend a term of 25 years to repay. And then again, we talked about this in December, but as a reminder, the revolving construction fund has, to qualify for that, their loan amount has to be under $1 million, and that fund always has 0%, and so that's kind of where the terms come from. And so with that, yeah, the cost estimate and sharing will remain as authorized, and with the board providing $962,000, which is 85%. And so the recommendation will be that the board authorize 85% of the project cost up to $962,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $38,500. So yeah, any questions on that?
Okay, thank you, Ethan. Yeah, questions or comments?
You said authorized.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh yeah,
it
this
is
will be a commit, okay.
It is
All right.
commit, yeah.
All right, if there's no questions or comments, I'll be happy to make the motion to approve on this one. And then, thanks, Ethan. And then next, we're circling back to that Davis and Weber County's Canal Company, project RM121. Tom's going to brief us on this one.
And Madam Chair, members of the board, this is actually from the latest round of funding for the secondary meter.
Oh, that's right.
Meters on Davis Weber. So Davis Weber has about 17,000 water meters, and I think they've metered approximately 11,500, and that includes the ones they did prior to the ARPA funding, and then including the board's funding. And the first run around, I think they got $10 million in grant. The second round they got $7 million in grant, and so the board has already authorized and committed the grant for this round, which is the 2.6 million. The board in September of 2024 authorized the loan part of the latest meter funding, and so they're just coming back before the board today for committal of funds for the loan part of the meter funding. And just maybe a comment about, we were starting to hear from several of the entities that are installing meters that even though the deadline is almost 2 years out to use all the ARPA grant, they're starting to wonder if they will be able to use all of that. Davis Weber is one of those entities.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a reason, I mean, is it just they don't,
Oh.
that they can't get it done, or that they don't anticipate the need at that time, or they can't get the supplies, or
It's
contractors?
a combination.
Or
I know in Davis Weber, like I mentioned before, they've been really proactive on doing it. And at first it was the supplies, and now they think they've kind of got that worked out. The manufacturers kind of ramped up production, but now it's getting them installed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. So board member looks like.
I didn't even mention the repayment terms, but
Oh, yeah, I know.
it's what I said before, 1% interest,
yeah.
15 years.
Thank
And
you.
so-
That's great. Marisa.
Madam Chair, if I may, just in response to Vice Chair Davis' question, yeah, Tom mentioned that we've been hearing this, labor, you know, because, and especially up in Davis Weber, everybody up there's trying to put these meters on and trying to get the labor in. So I know with Davis and Weber, they've got the contractor doing the easy ones, but then there's the more difficult ones because of location or size where their staff is, you know, they asked, I think a year ago, he said, can our staff put some of this in, our employees that, you know, maybe sitting around in the shop? Yeah, absolutely. And so we are reimbursing for that as well. They're accounting for that. So what they're having their employees do more than anything is when they have some time, they go do the more difficult ones while the contractors are doing the little bit more easy ones. And I'm hearing that across from several projects, so.
Yeah, and in cases where they do have the contractor do the work and they don't have the meters, they still have them put in the meter boxes, the meter setter, put in a jumper which is just a piece of pipe that crosses that space until they do get the meters. Then a lot of the times they have their own staff go out and install the meters as they come in.
Great. All right. Thank you. And it's helpful that they're being so proactive about making sure that, you know, that they're getting those funds deployed as soon as possible. If that means using their own staff and then just keeping close accounting of that, that's really wise. All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. So we'll assume that Board Member Van Horn will make the motion on that one. The next item is a special item. We just have a withdrawal that we need to formally approve. It's Hyrum City. Looks like, let's see, I read about this last night. Oh, they just became exempt from the secondary metering. Is that right? Okay. Anything else to?
They converted their project,
Thanks, Ani. I appreciate that. I know this one's fairly straightforward, but just great to have a bit of context. And
They converted their ARPA funds to a conservation type project, and they were going to line their canals. And they discussed it with their city council, and they've decided that it was not good use of the grant money or Hyrum's reserve funds, and so they backed out of the ARPA funds. We contacted them a couple of times, and they were still committed to the project, and then at the very last minute, they apparently decided not to take the money, so
all right,
it's being withdrawn.
Okay, so we'll look to a motion to withdraw. Board Member Jones, are you okay making that motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then the next application that we just need to note is RE 493. This is Dry Gulch Irrigation Company. This is in Board Member Merkley's area. It's just a new application, so it's information. We don't need to take any motions on it. Is that correct? Make sure. Okay, thank you. Marisa.
Madam Chair, if I may explain about an application summary we had on the last board meeting, just catch everybody up on that.
Thank you.
On our last board meeting, we had an application summary like this one for Dry Gulch, where for Pine Valley Irrigation Company, We have funded them several times over the years. It was a long time ago, both culinary and ag. This was for culinary, and when we got down there, we went down at the beginning of the month, I think, Spencer. And after a little while, I was realizing the streets were very, 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 very quiet on a really beautiful sunny day. And so it hit me, and I said, how many year-round connections do you have? And it was about 20% is what they first threw out. And that's when it hit me that our funding in our rules, our funding indicates that we cannot fund projects where there's not 50% or more of their connections are year-round.
Okay.
So that project will not be funded.
Okay.
So just making you aware, we don't withdraw it. We don't.
This is because we haven't gotten to
Because you haven't done an
committal.
action.
Okay.
Yeah, but wanted to make you aware of that, and thought in
authorized
talking to
purchase
Shalane
application,
today, and talking to
Okay.
Shalane today, I thought it was important to bring that up because it's a special case and good for the board members to be aware of one of those rules that we've
Yeah.
got that we can't fund.
Yeah.
So it's happened before, but we've never gotten quite to the application summary sometimes, or, yeah.
All right. Any questions or comments about that? All right. Thank you. So it looks like finishing out the agenda, this will be great. We'll get a transparent water billing update from Josh Zimmerman. And then, of course, we'll do the director's report and we will adjourn. Why don't we go for this briefing meeting to information to the board? Are we going to start maybe with finances, or I'll turn the time over to Director Hassenuger to take us through information to the board.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So first off, we'll have Shalane DiBernardi come up and provide a status of funds.
Good morning, everyone. So things are looking pretty good. There hasn't been a ton since December, other than we did get all those ARPA funds contracted, so woohoo! We'll start in the revolving construction fund with regular project funds, and you can see there's, even with everything that's obligated, either authorized or committed, we still have over $15 million available. So we'd be happy to receive applications for those smaller projects. We've had this discussion about the dam safety funds in the revolving fund, that even though the projects aren't listed, there is a list out there. Tom sent that list earlier this month, and I didn't get it all out to you. I wanted to chat with you first. So in that unofficial estimation, these funds are already obligated. We know where they're going, but there was a little bit of a shakeup earlier this week, of course, with the FEMA dam safety funds, wondering what these federal funds, what was going to happen. And then, yeah, so it's been fun with no grants, wait, never mind. We just keep waiting to see where we'll go with those FEMA funds. But the dam safety list is still moving along, and so we'll get that projection forwarded out to all of you. You can see with the city's water loan fund, with what's happened with Heber City in the last meeting, and the hurricane project that's still been authorized. We're expecting committal soon. They're still working on things for us. But if both those projects move forward, we've only got about $3 million left in the city's water loan fund. As you'll recall, we had quite a vigorous discussion in December about zero interest out of that fund. It's not a requirement that projects get 0%, but they are able to. Municipalities even are able to get 0% if they're over the affordability guidelines. So those are the projects sitting there, and then our C&D fund is flush. We still, even with all the projects on the list, authorized, committed, contracted in this fiscal year, We still have officially over 170 million on the books. We have not separated out those projects that are separated for, distinctly set aside for Southern Utah water reuse projects. But there are some funds in there. We are expecting an application from Washington County Water Conservancy District, but haven't seen one yet. So once we get that, I'll make sure to start tracking those funds separately so you can see where they are. So that is our status of funds. We are open to projects, although Candace will be mentioning here later, we did get word this week of some potential really large projects that even this 170 million won't cover. So so I would say we're open to receiving applications, and we are, but it looks like we may have some soon. So are there any questions on the status of funds?
Shalane, I just had one question.
Mm-hmm.
I've received comments and questions about the city's water loan fund
Mm-hmm.
and its involvement in House Bill 285.
Yes.
What are the consequences and what should we understand?
So if 285, and Candace can correct me if I'm wrong, but if 285 is passed, one of the things that we looked at last year as a result of HB 280 is, could any of the board's funds be integrated into the water infrastructure fund and used for other projects? And we suggested that possibly the city's water loan fund could do that, because everything that's funded with city's water loan could be funded with conservation and development C&D funds. The only difference is that the C&D fund currently doesn't offer 0% for projects that may need it. However, if 285 is passed and the city's water loan fund is integrated into the water infrastructure fund and basically ceases to exist as regular board funds, what I expect we would come to you and ask is if the board would be willing to change the guidelines, because it's not in statute, it's just a board guideline that the C&D fund require interest. So to be able to allow those zero interest loans to municipalities when it's absolutely necessary, we might ask the board to consider changing the guidelines on the C&D fund. But that's what would happen, is those funds that are unobligated could be wrapped into the water infrastructure fund. Candace, you look like you want to clarify, add, please.
I would love to add, Madam Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, Shalane's spot on. So we did complete the existing fund study, which I don't know if you've seen that. You have, okay. So this is one of the options. One of the other things that are in our reasoning for suggesting it was it as we go down this path of doing a unified water infrastructure plan and having having these ranked and prioritized lists, which is the path that we are on as a state, there's a high likelihood that the Division of Drinking Water will cover all drinking water projects. And so drinking water projects may not come to this board like they used to. That's not guaranteed by any means, but there is a chance that would be the case. And so that was another element in our thinking of recommending the city water and loans fund be rolled into the water infrastructure fund.
So would that change, Madam Chair, if I can, would that change then how we're funded through the legislature? Would they divert funds then?
Madam Chair, if that's okay. Okay. It does not change the tax breakup right now. And Joel did a really good job going over this in the last board meeting. And I think it's probably really important that we kind of keep thinking through this and how this will impact. Because one of the things that could happen is, so right now the other elements of HB 285 that Joel, I'm sure, will cover as well, really looks at how does our existing funds work with this water infrastructure fund, and how we envisioned it in our framework, our proposal as part of the existing fund study is that any projects that come in that boards have available funding for would go to those boards. And then kind of once all of that, the dust settles there as far as what can be funded with our existing funds, then we could look at where is there needs that aren't being met, and is there funds within the existing board funds? So whether if that's drinking water has existing funds or extra funds, or you guys have extra funds, that you could say, well, water quality has a big deficit. And I know that right off. I know already they have like $100 million deficit. And so the boards, you guys will make a decision of like, oh, we could, you know, give whatever, 10 million, 25 million, whatever you think it is the right number to kind of go into the bigger pool to help fund some of these other resources. So this is really trying to spread our resources across the state. I would say that the other goal of this is that it is not just the existing funds that will be funding water infrastructure. Shalane can speak to this a little bit more as well. We are going to look at a fee study that was also as part of HB 280 that could be a potential end user fee. We don't know exactly what it would look like that could contribute to water infrastructure funding. And so that study is going to be kicked off here and then needs to be completed by October of this year. And then the other piece, and this is a real reality, I'll jump a little ahead in our information to the board, but I had a discussion with Metropolitan of Salt Lake and Sandy yesterday, and they indicated, so they received a $1.5 million grant to do for aqueduct resiliency to kind of study their system, and they're coming back and saying their whole system's on a fault, their treatment plant, their canal, and so it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. They're currently out for an RFP to try to figure out what will be the initial kind of design on it and what will be the cost, but they are looking to based on my understanding, the board for help with those funds. Obviously, even with your, good balances, you wouldn't be able to cover all of it. But I think we're going to see a lot higher price tags. So that's another idea or another goal of this is that once we have that prioritized list, we can go to the legislature and say, we have this much in our existing funds, but we have, another $400 million request, right? And then they can decide how far down the list they kind of want to fund. The other thing I will say about HB 285 is I would say the Board of Water Resources has a little bit more discretion than the other boards on what you guys choose to add to the WIF. You have other requirements as far as Bear River Development and Lake Powell Pipeline that some of these C&D funds are slated to go to. So you can make decisions to, decide how much you want to hold back for purposes of that nature. You guys have a little bit more discretion than some of the other boards where it's just like if you don't have it authorized, then the other boards are kind of like they have to shuffle money around. So you guys have a bit more discretion. Happy to answer any questions.
No, and I appreciate that, Candace, because I did want to, I do think it's important to note that it doesn't change the current appropriations. It wouldn't change that, but it would allow for a new opportunity to go and say, okay, here are the water projects, here's what's funded, here's what's not. And give us, as the water funders, not just you, but water quality, drinking water, the opportunity to go as a whole and say, this is the shortfall. Can we get, and that was part of the initial vision, is treating it like transportation, is to be able to go and say, here's the shortfall. Will you as a legislature, as a state, provide additional funding to cover this? So it doesn't change the way things currently are. That's one thing with our current city's water loan fund. It doesn't receive new appropriations ever. It is purely just repayments and the revolving nature of the fund. It doesn't grow because of new appropriations. The C&D fund gets that sales tax money, but the city's water loan doesn't.
Okay, and that was, I'm still trying to get my arms around all of this.
Yeah.
So we're
And I'm not there.
Yeah.
But my observation is we've been very good with some of the smaller entities that really don't have much. And their numbers aren't big, so I recognize that from a population standpoint, some of these bigger projects potentially service many, many more people. But some of these smaller entities just don't have the means, and I don't want to forget them.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like we are, but I'm trying to get my arms around that so that when these requests come in, there is some discretion. We can ask, but if we go ask for funds from the legislature for a small 100 population city versus Salt Lake Sandy Metropolitan, I know where the legislature's going on that already. So it's just the way things are. But those are still important.
Yes.
And I've always felt that this board really tries hard to address those, and I think it's a good thing.
And I do think it's important to note, Candace and I were just chatting yesterday, that there will need to be an effort, an extreme effort on our division staff to get out and find those small projects to be able to get on the list. So we know the big ones. You know, they know what's going on.
They find us.
And and when they hear prioritization and ranking, they'll come out. We will make a concerted effort to go make sure through the watershed councils, through whatever local means are available, to find those smaller projects, the smaller municipalities, even the irrigation projects that might not fit in the revolving fund, because the revolving fund is exempt from this. That's one thing we did, is said, hey, if it's less than $1 million, we don't think it should have to be included in this process. But we are going to have to figure out how we're going to get out there and find these projects to make sure they do get on the list and do get proper consideration, because that's one thing our work group, the Water Development Coordinating Council, has set as a priority, is rural entities need proper consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got some questions from our board members who are participating online. First of all, I will note that board member Brian Steed has joined us online. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to board member Jones, and then we'll go to board member Van Horn.
I appreciate all the discussion here on 285. I just had a question. As a request goes to the legislature, would whatever funds that the legislature allocate, would those go to our agency for disbursement and consideration, or would that just be funded directly from the legislature after the request was granted?
Madam Chair, if I might. That's a great question. And so how this will likely, a lot of this is just, our best estimate on what the framework will look like. And I think we do need to be flexible. Is the legislature, well, one, I would say another goal of Representative Snyder's is that there's more grant money available. I don't know what that means. I don't know what scale that means, but that might also help contribute to these big infrastructure costs. It will likely go to the Water Infrastructure Fund, and then the Water Development Coordinating Council, who has representatives from all of the relevant agencies, as well as CIB and AG, and the Treasurer's Office and Washington County Water Conservancy District, will distribute that to the boards. So one of our other goals is that we're not duplicating all the work that you guys are doing and staff is doing for each of the boards. We don't want to have a separate process of which that money is kind of doled out, that it will be kind of plugged into whatever boards have the priority. So if there was a deficit in the amount of water quality funding available to do some of their projects, then it would go to them, and then their board would oversee it. If there was a big regional project or, you know, an irrigation project or something like that, then it would go to the Board of Water Resources, or something of that nature would be how that kind of money would flow. So yeah, it would eventually make it back to the boards, but it would start in the WIF, is my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Van Horn.
My questions have pretty much been answered, so move on.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on status of funds? Well, we appreciate it. You always do a nice job of just keeping us in the loop on everything, and there's so much going on, and we'll just continue to stay close to this. I do understand, Shalene, that you're doing a training for the new board members. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, I'm going to schedule a training for Tim and William and hopefully Brian. We're going to try to make sure it's a time when you're available. And the rest of you will be invited if you'd like a refresher on board procedures and kind of how staff handles projects and things like that. So yes, I do plan to schedule that for February. So before the March meeting, we'll get something on the books, and I will invite all of you. I'm going to stay here because I have another item I want to discuss with you. But before I move to that, I did want to point out one thing. On the transparent water billing update, we are requesting that the board take action. We received another appropriation. It's mentioned in the report that there's another $1 million available. New applications are being received. So we will ask you to do what you did back in 2021 and pre-approve grants that the division determines are appropriate, and then come back to report afterwards. That's been the standard practice. And so this today is an update on how that prior $2 million has been contracted out, and asking you to pre-approve those grants. So just wanted to bring that to you.
Thank you for that reminder. And we do have, suggested language for that motion in our board packet. So thank you for reminding us of that. I wonder if Board Member Steed, would you be open to making the motion for that pre-approval? He may be driving here. Okay.
We may just assume.
Yes. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So the other item I wanted to discuss with you is the board tour coming up in August. Normally we just tell you that, okay, it's this person's turn, but last year got a little weird. And so I wanted to chat with the board members about it a little bit. Through our standard rotation, last year was officially Juliet's area, so Salt Lake Tooele, but we hadn't added the Great Salt Lake, Brian Steed, into the mix because that was a new board member, new position, and Juliet said, "Hey, I'll let Brian cover. I will cede." And so she offered up Great Salt Lake, and we had a wonderful airboat tour on the Great Salt Lake. But the board meeting then ended up north instead of in the Salt Lake Tooele area. The board meeting ended up in Davis or Weber. Was it Davis County? In Farmington. So my question to throw out to the board is, as we get prepared for this year, since we did have a meeting fairly near Salt Lake, do you want to stay in the Salt Lake Tooele area this year, or would you like to move on in the rotation and maybe push Salt Lake Tooele to a couple years down the roads to separate Great Salt Lake from Salt Lake Tooele area? The next one on the list would be the Sevier River area. Okay. So it's been 2017 since we were there.
So my thinking on this has changed just a little bit since yesterday, and I don't have strong feelings, but I'll just throw it out so it's out there. I was very happy that Brian took the lead on planning the tour, and it kind of worked out, that I just assumed that we would just say that was good for Salt Lake in terms of getting combined or getting it through and then move on to the next. we've recently, but after yesterday hearing about the potential application from Metro for potentially like hundreds of millions of dollars in need, I mean, it does make me think a little bit that perhaps it might be useful for us as a board to spend some time on
In
kind
the
of Salt Lake
area.
City, Salt Lake
Okay.
City area. But that, again, I don't have strong feelings about that,
I
but
agree with that.
yeah.
It's going to be potentially a lot of ask, a lot.
Okay, so is there any objection to having this year's board tour in the Salt Lake area? Okay.
I mean, I feel like I'll need to confer with the official mascot, Violet Stewart, age 10, about what her preference for the board tour is. But no, I appreciate that. I do think, again, my thinking changed after yesterday.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful for us. Thank
Okay,
you.
I appreciate that. Thank you all for your input.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shalane. Joel, do you want to give us a legislative update, please?
Good morning, board members. I just wanted to I noticed several of you already had access to our bill tracker, but a few of the new ones didn't, so I just sent an email with a link to our internal water resources bill tracker, where we put bills of interest and bills that could have water impacts, some directly to us, some just within the water community. And it's kind of a place for us to follow them through the process. And so open to any suggestions you have on how we could improve this tracking tool. But that'll be what I kind of walk through as we go through the next couple of board meetings to talk about the legislation that is happening. So one of them, the House Bill 41, it's titled State Water Policy Amendments. It just has a line in it that Utah will promote state water planning, including the formation of the state water plan, which is in our code. And so it doesn't really, it's just a mention that is one of the things Utah will promote. So we didn't have any concerns about that. There's several that are maybe of interest but not directly impacting us. I was at the House Committee for Natural Resources last night, and there was very interesting discussion about fluoride amendments and whether or not fluoride should be added. The bill would prohibit adding fluoride to public water systems, and it did pass committee last night, leaving that open to those that want fluoride can go and get a prescription, and those that don't would not have it come to them in their drinking water by adding it. There's obviously trace amounts already in most of the drinking water in Utah that just naturally occurs, but would not be adding it. So we'll follow that one as it goes through. There is one about professional license degree amendments. Originally it was saying for both engineers, geologists, also land surveyors and accountants, they would not be required to have a degree from an accredited university. They must have gotten some pushback from the engineering community, and that one has now been removed in a substitute, but it does still include the others: architects, environmental health scientists, land surveyors, accountants, and geologists would still. And we're kind of been seeing a push in that direction, maybe from the governor's office, that within the state employment, less emphasis on the degree you have and more emphasis on your abilities, and so we'll see how this plays out. You would still be required to pass the professional license, any exams and things like that, but it does change that degree requirement to not be from an accredited university. County classification amendments, House Bill 176 from Representative Brooks would change the breakdowns of how many of the population requirements to meet a certain county class and thresholds, and that has already been substituted once. We'll just kind of follow that and see if it changes again. So for the 5 different, or I guess from first class to 6th class county sizes, and there's a breakdown in that tracker of what those population thresholds are. We'll follow that one because some of the legislation that some of the state code that we implement does have specific requirements. Oh, for class 4 counties or class 5 counties. And so that'll impact some of our work. We'll just probably wait to see how that shakes out. And then we'll be able to know. Question from Dana?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was on a call yesterday with the county clerks and auditors, and that bill, as it's proposed, that they'd made some changes, would only change Washington County from 2nd to 3rd. Everybody, all the other 28 counties would remain in the same place that they are.
Interesting. Thanks for the update on that. There's a House Bill 223 titled State Grant Requirements from Representative Stephanie Grecius. Talks about that if an agency administers a grant, that they would then be open to the recipient of that grant requesting disclosure on how many work hours were needed by that agency to administer the grant and kind of what were total expenses. And so that's just something that any grant administering agency like us would be open to, and we could provide that information. We considered whether it would have a fiscal impact to us, but don't feel like it would be a substantial amount of work to be able to provide that information to any grant recipient. There was one thing I'm pausing on that particular bill, and I'm trying to remember exactly where some of our grant funding would not be subject to that, and I'm trying to remember. I think it was, if it's, I'll have to follow up on that one. Okay. The 270, House Bill 274 is from Representative Snyder, titled Water Amendments. Talks about setting tiered water rates for both drinking water and secondary water. It does put some penalties in for secondary water, that if someone is found to not be using tiered rates, that the state engineer could take an enforcement action. I know Representative Snyder has heard some feedback from the secondary metering community on this bill, saying we're doing everything we can to get these meters installed. Why would you require us to start billing on secondary water usage before we're finished installing meters? And I think I know there's some dialogue happening there, and we'll see if this bill is modified or held. We'll see. But I do know that there's concerns out there. I know one request is to have the effective date for this be after 2030, after the metering requirement, and say, okay, at that point, then ask everyone to start billing according to metered usage. But there were concerns about starting before that date. House Bill 285 is one that you have already had some discussion on, really allowing the water funding agencies of drinking water, water quality, and water resources to be able to both put money into the water infrastructure fund and receive money out of it. And I think it's that idea of being able to share funds, which doesn't currently exist amongst the state funding agencies. So if there were, say, a large project and one particular agency needed more funds in that given year, that would allow that sharing of funds to occur, whereas currently that does not exist. Let's see, House Bill 311, Watershed Amendments, also from Representative Snyder, would allow the state engineer to require repair of certain hydroelectric facilities, kind of with the goal of preventing water waste and mitigating environmental impacts. That bill has not been heard yet in committee, and the impact that I see to this one would probably be to operators of hydroelectric facilities, that they could be, it would allow for a lawsuit essentially if somebody felt like they were wasting water or weren't operating their facilities to mitigate risk, that someone could then sue that electric operator. Hydroelectric facility operator. So I see some potential risks to those with those facilities, and then the comment that I submitted on this one was regarding our board, where when the board funds a project, the board technically owns that project until it is purchased back by the applicant in the case of a purchase agreement. And so there could be a period of time where the board would be at risk of being the owner of that hydroelectric facility. And so I tried to indicate that in the fiscal note that we submitted. And looking now to the Senate bills, one that caught us off guard was Senate Bill 27, titled Motor Vehicle Division Amendments, which was one that I initially dismissed, thinking that doesn't apply to water, but it does change the tax, sales tax distribution slightly, and we were one of the only agencies affected. It was us and the Drink Division of Water Rights. Received a slightly different amount of sales tax funding, and when we pointed that out, they came out with a substitute to the bill that made it an even smaller adjustment. So their estimate was that we may receive $1,000 in additional sales tax in the next couple of years, but a negligible amount of change. But it was just interesting the way that one came out. The Senate Bill 126, Airborne Chemical Amendments from Senator Winterton, is targeting kind of the, I'm just going to say the conspiracy theories out there about commercial airliners flying in the air and putting chemicals into the air, and the bill was intended to target that, and there were, thankfully the sponsor worked with us to say, well, how do we not also then prohibit the cloud seeding efforts that the state is doing? And so our meteorologist, Jonathan Jennings, was really helpful in distinguishing the two, and the term that is used for maybe the non-official cloud seeding would be geoengineering, and so the bill would prohibit geoengineering but still allow the cloud seeding efforts that the state is doing. So that one is not one that is a concern, because our efforts would still be able to go forward. But I guess it brings it's something that then the sponsor could to say to the constituents, hey, look, we've got this bill now that prohibits the type of activity that you're concerned about. And then anyway, was there a question?
I did have a question. What's the enforcement mechanism on that?
That's a great question. I'm just going to open it up to see how the final language ended up.
We can follow up offline. I'm sorry, but I was just curious. Thanks.
It's a felony.
But as far as the enforcement, I don't see any enforcement listed in the bill.
Madam Chair, there was some discussion about having the Division of Water Resources be responsible for enforcing that, and we were like, we do not.
I don't know. I feel like maybe there's some board members that might be interested in a.
Like, I don't even know how we would regulate that, and we don't want to get it confused with cloud seeding, so we kindly backed out of that one.
Does it come with a plane?
I mean, that's what I'm saying, you know?
It seems like something you need a fast plane for, so.
Thank you. Yeah.
It does say it requires the Department of Transportation to report credible instances of suspected weather geoengineering to the Attorney General. So we'll see.
Okay.
I think the last one that I wanted to mention today is Senate Bill 131, Water Commitment Amendments from Senator Bluen. And it would be the ability to, in someone's water conservation plan, a municipality, local government, in their water conservation plan, they could designate some of their water to a sovereign land. I think we all know that this is probably thinking in terms of like Great Salt Lake or some of the other sovereign water bodies in the state, being able to dedicate water to that. There was a very good question in that committee meeting of, would this be prohibited under current law? And the answer was no, that there's nothing prohibiting that from happening right now. It's just kind of stating it for people to, it'd be one of there's a list of items for them to consider as they do a water conservation plan, and this would just be added to that list of things for them to consider that they may include. So that's what I had. Any questions on legislation?
questions? Yeah, please go ahead. Questions? Yeah,
I just had more of a comment, Madam Chair.
Please go for it.
Do we currently fluorinate, is that the right word, our water? Our drinking water?
There were two entities, I think it was within Davis County and then Salt Lake Public Utilities, I think.
And Brigham City, yeah.
In Brigham City. The reason I ask is, I don't know if you all remember this, but I remember being in elementary school and then bringing in the trays of those individual cups that had the foil on the top, and you had to swish for a particular amount of time. Joel, it was a real thing, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's required right now. In 2020, I believe, in Salt Lake County and Davis County, voters approved countywide fluoridation, and then also Brigham City.
2023 Brigham City did the same.
Yeah.
Interesting. Just a comment. I just had a flashback, so I had to offer that to everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I just because I have you here, both of you here, and it will be good to have that opportunity for training for the new board members, and I might even jump in just to listen in, because even after all of my time on the board, I always forget these things, and I was trying to look into the code, couldn't find it myself. What is the current earmark? Right, a lot of our funding is coming from a sales tax earmark. What is that sales tax earmark nowadays? And we can get this later, actually, but.
So they break it up into, and I think Candace will probably quickly find a graphic that kind of helps illustrate it. So there's broken up into two pots. There's the first 17.5 million, which has a certain breakdown of who it goes to. Some of it goes to water resources, some of it to water quality, several different agencies, and then there's language for above that amount. It would be broken according to these percentages, and that's actually where we end up getting most of our money.
Yes,
is because that sales tax does exceed the 17.5, and so overall, on average, you could say the board might receive about $35 million in sales tax funds, but it does fluctuate.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And someone passed this over to me. Thank you, because he's ready. On July 1st, 2003, the legislature started earmarking sales tax for water. Currently, 1/8% of the sales tax subsidizes all of these programs. And this is then you go to, it sounds like those subsidies, those breakouts for different things. I'll just going to throw it out there because I think it's relevant to some of the conversations and discussions. I just quickly looked to see how much of the sales and use tax in Utah is earmarked right now. So again, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's 1/8% is for water generally, I think, if I understand this. In the most recent economic report to the governor, it looks like 37% of all sales and use tax collections are earmarked nowadays. And the majority of that's going to transportation. And so I was interested to see the differential as we're talking about the water infrastructure projects and how we make sure that we get water infrastructure funded. More of a comment than anything else.
Yeah, and just another reflection. So of that 1/8, 1/16 of that goes to the water infrastructure restricted account, which has very defined uses of pretty much funding state water projects and repair and replacement of federal projects. The legislature in HB 280 from last year did take out $50 million each year for the next 4 years out of WIRA and transferred it to your C&D account for that Colorado River reuse projects piece that Shalane mentioned earlier. But so a big chunk of that is kind of being stockpiled away for these other really pretty significant projects.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Joel, thanks for resharing the tracker. It's quite helpful to have that information all in one place. So thanks for letting us see your internal.
And then I will be at the department's legislative liaison meeting during lunch, so I won't be able to join you at that time, but look forward to further updates.
All right, thank you.
Great. And we just have two final quick items for you. One, we are preparing for the Utah Water Users Workshop in March. That also aligns with your board meeting on March 19th. And I guess mainly just a request to reach out to Shannon if you need help with travel or registration. I know sometimes certain board members have had other people funding their way there, and that's happened. But I mean, we're happy to make sure you get there and get to attend the conference on Monday, the 17th, so St. Patty's Day. There will be a water law and policy conference, which I have, for the last probably nearly a decade have gone to that and find it very useful. Happy to make sure you get there as well. So just please reach out to Shannon and let her know of your travel needs and plans. And Shannon, do you need that done by a certain date? Sooner? Okay. Within the next couple
Thank
weeks.
you.
Great. And then I already talked to you about one potential project that may be on the horizon. We'll definitely get more information on that metro project, but Marisa, do you want to come and talk about the other one?
Yes, I got a phone call because Candace had nothing better to do this week, Monday, telework, Tuesday, federal funding. Yesterday was, hey, we have an emergency project. So, Mike, I don't know if you got a chance to see your email. It is not in Utah County. I found that out. Yeah. And Candace brought that up when I explained it to her. So there was a canal breach that occurred in the East Jordan Irrigation Company near the gravel pit at the point of the mountain. I don't have a whole lot of info other than what we talked about briefly. I talked about briefly with him on the phone. They've already started. They've already got, it happened on December 23rd. Merry Christmas to them. And it wasn't even their water because their water was out of the canal. But somewhere in there, this is the story I'm trying to recoup. Someone was putting in a bridge somewhere and they put something in the canal to dam up the canal, and then it breached. So insurance will not cover the canal repair. It could cover damages from that, but not damages to it. They're looking at about $2 million. So in the last month, they've gotten an engineer. So they have Bowen Collins working on this. They have a design. They have a cost estimate, and it sounds like the contractor got started. So we typically we don't like to fund projects that we weren't involved with earlier. It would have been very difficult for them on December 23rd to call us and be able to really say anything without getting a design involved. So the design is almost always involved first before we get involved. But we have done this on an emergency basis before. We've had a canal fail in, I think, Midvale several years ago. Joel's very well versed in that one. Maybe he tried to forget it. And then we had the mudslide for the West Cache Irrigation Company that occurred up in Idaho. And so we quickly jumped on with them. There was the Garden City, the pipe failure from a canal that had been piped. And so that's what we've got going on right now. They're looking at about $2 million cost estimate. And I let them know the most we can do is about 85% of that. I am going to talk to them to see if there's any way they can provide more of their own money and maybe bring it down to an amount that could come out of the revolving construction fund. But it is pretty much ag, so they would get 1% interest on it. So they're supposed to be getting me an application, and we're going to get it on the March board meeting, the feasibility. And we're hoping to do the committal of funds also. I sent them already the list, including their attorney and their engineer were on the email, sent them the list of this is stuff that needs to get started on now. The attorney's opinions so often can be the part that makes it difficult because of water rights and easements and such. I don't know if there's any kind of permitting. I don't know. So their engineer will have to help the attorney on that. So just making you aware of that, because we found out yesterday there's no application summary. It is in Juliet's area after all. Candace was wondering if maybe it was on the Utah County side. And so hence my joke in my email in the other county.
And hence mine.
Oh, yeah.
That other county
Kind of
down
the same-
south.
yeah, the same joke now.
But yeah, it sounds like from the engineer, it occurred in the Salt Lake County.
So I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The other projects you mentioned that I'm familiar with,
Yeah.
the West Cache and so
Yeah.
forth, those were acts of nature or
Yes.
whatever, landslides, things like this. This sounds like a negligent issue.
Yes.
And
Not
so-
from the Canal, not from the irrigation
Well,
company.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Ridge.
But
Yeah.
it appears that there should be opportunity for somebody to go after somebody on this.
Yes.
And my question more is not that we don't help them, that
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity to help, but
Yeah.
can we push the issue that you need to go after them? And if you do get those funds, we need to get paid back.
Yeah. And
Type of a scenario. And
Gotcha.
I'm very brief on that, but I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
everything about
Yeah.
this, but
we didn't discuss that part.
Yeah.
We discussed what about your insurance? What about, where this happened? We didn't get into a lot of detail. He sounded very stressed out still, a month later. But I said, that they already even had our application. Someone on their board works with Salt Lake City Public Utilities, and so they knew about our application. So we just reemphasized to them, we're already past the deadline to get this report on the March board meeting, so we need that application very soon. So we'll plan on authorization and committal of funds, but if there's some big holdup on, so we authorize, and they're supposed to do all this legal work and all, the design and finish the design and all that, and then water conservation plan. And I realized the canal safety management plan, I hope they have one and they're in compliance, because that's one of the requirements in the attorney's opinion as well. And so usually that all gets done between two board meetings when we then commit funds, like has happened with these other 4. We authorized them sooner before they did all, they've done their work, and now it's time for committal of funds. This one, we're going to try to do committal of funds at the March board meeting. We'll put it that way on the board agenda. We can always not do committal of funds depending on what's going on with the situation.
So I appreciate the question coming up, because Marissa briefed me on this last night, and then I slept on it and woke up kind of the same thought where, every penny that we're dealing with is precious and it belongs to the taxpayers. And so I just want to make sure that this isn't a situation where it's just easier to come to the board as opposed to going through
Gotcha.
some sort of process. And like I said, this is something I haven't thought a whole lot through. Yeah. And so I guess anything you can do to help us make sure that we're protecting these funds, to make sure that whoever's liable, has the opportunity to cover, but not at the harm of the company though. So that's what we have to balance. We have to balance. I don't think that we can be, like I said, so I'm currently thinking about it. I don't think that we can, be extremely strict if it means that, we're going to cause additional damage. But if it's a situation of, it's just the friction is less to go to the board to ask for taxpayer money rather than to go through with any sort of private sector mitigation, I want to make sure that we're being protective of that. And then the other question I had, and I don't need anything specific, but just maybe given our conversation, just letting the board know, remind us of the magnitude of Salt Lake City's participation in terms of owning shares for this particular company.
I think he said that Salt Lake City owns 29% of the
so that kind of
29% shareholder.
See, I was looking for general. You gave me specific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well done.
And let me go back to what we were, Mike, and also your comment. And I appreciate you bringing this up. I can now go back to them and talk to them about this. This is at the top of their system. They're trying to get it done before April 15th when they turn water.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the discussions have been with whomever, whatever. He didn't tell me who or what. It was very brief, kind of a, I could tell he didn't necessarily want to go into the detail at that moment. He was just trying to find out about funding. So I think the concern is having the funding to get going. That being said, they also said they have a substantial amount in their account right now. They're also looking at possibly a personal loan to bridge if there's an issue with our funding. I told them the earliest they'll see funding from us, if they do everything quickly and get all of their legal work done, the earliest they would see funding from us would be the beginning of April.
Okay.
And that includes, the March 19th board meeting, but then, we could have the agreement written ahead of time, but even that still takes a couple weeks to edit it and through, and Mike will learn about this and, looking for signatures. I mean, someone will find out about this that Juliet won't have to, I should say that, Juliet won't have to worry about that part. And so the earliest is then, but I said, well, if your contractor just started, you won't see a bill for a month. But again, it sounds like they have enough to cover that sort of thing. And yeah.
Thanks for getting this on our radar ASAP.
Yeah. And if I can, you know what, like the one up in Garden City, the company believed it was negligence of a developer below and digging out for a glamping campground. They've been trying to deal with that over all this time, and I don't know what the end result was. We have had times when we've been asked, what can we use the funding for if we're trying, we're racking up attorney bills now and stuff like that. So, and we kind of look at things case by case and work with them on that to try to help out. But I know with the one up in Garden City, they were attempting to try to figure out. The West Cache one, Mother Nature just said, sorry.
Yeah.
I gave you the tree that made it all the way down the hill. Yeah. So, but Ethan, is that one done? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So they're all done. So they'll have water. But yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. But I will bring that up to them.
I just had one question on the scope of the project. You mentioned a $2 million price tag.
Yeah.
Is that just for the repair of the embankment, or does that include any? If there was an inadvertent entry of water into their system, are we looking at any improvements on the diversion as well?
So actually, I don't know this part. In talking to Candace and telling her, it was like, I think the water that was in there was probably stormwater or melting, drainage. I don't know that yet. I don't know if they're planning to pipe. I really don't know anything right now. It was just, right now we're looking at $2 million cost estimate, and we didn't get into details if it's just fixing it or piping it or what. So that is, again, something I can ask them, but hopefully we'll see a funding application this week.
Okay. Thank you.
Which is tomorrow. But they have the info that we usually need for the application. So just filling it out.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I may just ask, just for our knowledge, and we don't have to have this answer now, but maybe this is a Sarah question. Can we as a board put conditions onto support? So could we put a condition on that we ask? And again, you don't have to answer me now.
I don't know the answer right now.
Yeah.
I would, but this is something we need to look into for sure.
Okay, great.
And I agree with all of you that if there is a private sector liability sort of avenue, that we don't necessarily as a board always want to be.
Yeah. And perhaps the role, again, this is just all on discussion and it just coming to us and thinking about, but perhaps the role of the board is to provide like that ability for this to be dealt with timely, to get that construction done and taken care of. And then if we could put some condition on that, we would be reimbursed through any sort of,
I'll have to look into that, see what we're allowed to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It sounds like that is everything from the division. We should go have lunch. And so be looking for a final motion, and then we'll reconvene for the board meeting at 1 p.m. All right. I guess I still have all the time I've been doing this. I can never remember if we need a second, but I think we do. And great. All in favor? Aye. All right. We'll see everyone at 1. We'll see you online at 1. Dana and Spencer. Thank you.